This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. I've been pretty fortunate in that over the past few years, I've been able to purchase and use a number of new Mac computers as part of my business. One of the best things about Macs is that they come out of the box pretty much ready for you to just get up and running with. But I have learned some things over the years about how I like to set mine up. Certain settings I always like to change, features I like to toggle on and off that I feel personally make my Mac experience that bit better. And so, in this video, I'm going to share some of those settings with you. Hopefully they will make your Mac experience better too. Okay, let's get into it. So, the first thing you're going to do when you set up a new Mac is you're going to start downloading things like apps and other useful files. There is a Safari setting that by default is enabled on your Mac, whereby any files that your Mac considers safe, like movies, pictures, sound files, and PDFs, will automatically open when you download them to your computer, and personally, it drives me insane. It's really easy to switch this feature off. Open Safari, head to Preferences, and here in the General tab, uncheck this Open Safe Files box down here at the bottom. That way, when something is downloaded, it will literally just get downloaded to your computer and will wait for you to open the file at a time of your choosing instead. The Mac dock is pretty iconic, especially if you're more familiar with Windows computers, and with good reason. It's a helpful, visually pleasing tool that Mac users will use every single day. But I like to make some changes to mine to make it a bit more user-friendly, so let me show you what I do. First up, to get to these changes, go to System Preferences, then Dock and Menu Bar. You can of course change the size of the dock from large down to comically small, so it's worth playing around with this option to find something that works well for you. You can also change the position of the dock if you wish. I personally prefer to have mine at the bottom of the screen, but if you're more of a left or right screen person, this is where you can set that up. I then ensure that automatically hide and show the dock is ticked on, and that's because I'd personally prefer that when I'm working in an app, that app can go all the way to the bottom of the screen, rather than being restricted due to the dock. I simply have to hover my cursor at the bottom of the screen to have the dock show up. I like to have indicators for open apps visible, so I tend to keep this ticked on, and that's going to show me a little black dot under an app to illustrate that an app is currently running on my machine. It's helpful if you're closing down apps, for example, and you're not sure what you've currently got open. And I untick this Show Recent Applications in Dock option. With that selected, there would be a section to the right of the dock that shows me which apps I've had open recently, with the idea that I can quickly access those apps again if I need to. I just find it to be annoying, and so I have it switched off. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Maybe you've started your own business or side hustle, or maybe you're working on that passion project you always wanted to get started on. Either way, you're going to want a digital presence, and a website is still the first step in building out your brand online. Squarespace makes the whole process of building a website easy, but what I really appreciate is how many fantastic custom templates they offer. Getting started is always the hardest part of any new project, and Squarespace have so many custom templates to cover pretty much any type of website you can think of, from gaming and fashion to politics, food and photography. They even have templates for personal and CV websites. I was able to find a template for my Proper Honest Tech website in a matter of minutes, and customizing the template to really make it your own is a piece of cake. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/properhonesttech to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain, or use the code ProperHonestTech. If you own more than one Mac, perhaps a desktop and a laptop, or if you own a Mac and an iPad, provided they both fall within the requirements for this to work, I'll put something up on the screen now with a list of the different compatible models, you can use Universal Control. Universal Control is an absolute game changer of a feature that Apple rolled out earlier this year, and the idea is very simple. Control multiple Macs and iPads with the same keyboard and mouse, whilst also allowing you to drag files between them. So in my setup, for example, I've got a Mac Studio that I'm using as my main Mac, and then I've got this M1 Pro MacBook Pro on a stand to the right of it. Now without Universal Control, I'd either need a separate mouse and keyboard, or I'd be constantly reaching across to use it. But here, I just move my cursor over to the right of my main display and it switches over to my MacBook, and I can then use my mouse and keyboard over here instead. And sometimes I grab my iPad and drop it below my display here, and I can then use my mouse and keyboard to control my iPad too. Setting this up is easy. Provided you've got compatible devices, head into System Preferences, then Display, and ensure that all tick boxes are ticked in Universal Control. You may also need to choose Add Display and ensure that the relevant devices that you'd like to connect to are all selected in here. On iPad, head into Settings, then General, then AirPlay and Handoff, and toggle on Cursor and Keyboard Beta. Back on your main Mac, the one that you plan on using the keyboard and mouse from, back in System Preferences and Displays, you can drag the displays around on the screen to get them in the exact right position to match your setup. And that's it. With that done, you should be able to move your cursor between the different screens and use your keyboard to type across multiple devices. You can also do things like change the volume and brightness of a device using your keyboard, and even drag and drop files from one device to the other. It is a phenomenal productivity tool and well worth getting it set up. I understand why notifications are important, especially on iPhone and Watch, but on devices like your Mac and even your iPad, I'll be willing to bet that most people would be quite happy receiving fewer notifications. I don't need an alert each time my antivirus software has downloaded new updates, or to be told about every junk email that lands in my inbox. So I tend to toggle most notifications off whilst leaving the crucial ones on. To do that, open System Preferences and choose Notifications and Focus. I then tend to go through all of these options, disabling the ones that I know aren't going to be needed by me. You can see here that there are loads of apps, and some are going to be useful. Find My, for example, Messages. But music isn't an app that I'd ever want a notification from. Neither is books. So these are the kind of apps that I'm definitely going to be going into and toggling notifications off for. Whether you use the built-in trackpad on your Mac or an external mouse, you're going to want to configure both of them to have them running the way that suits you best. To do that, open up System Preferences and choose Mouse or Trackpad respectively, depending on what you use. For mouse, I like to keep the scroll direction natural, but you could invert it if you want to. I also do use a secondary click, which I've got set up on the right side of my Apple mouse. I don't use Smart Zoom personally, as I found I was triggering it by accident a bit too often, but it's there if you want it. I also like to play around with the tracking speed to get it just how I like it. I actually tend to go one to the left of center personally. Under More Gestures, I tend to leave off swiping between pages, but leave swiping between apps on, and leave double tap to Mission Control on. With the trackpad, I leave most things on, including tap to click, which is an absolute must-have for me personally. On trackpad, I tend to prefer my tracking speed to be a little faster than I do on my mouse, and I typically keep most of the scroll, zoom, and gestures toggled on, with the exception of App Expose, which I've just never really gotten on with personally. I also use a trackpad gesture which isn't included in this menu. It's actually in System Preferences, then Accessibility and Pointer Controls, then Trackpad Options. I tick Enable Dragging and then with 3-finger drag, and that allows for a quick and easy way to use 3 fingers to grab any window or item on my Mac and drag that item around. I totally get that not everybody is comfortable with cloud services like iCloud, and that's fine, but I'm totally bought into it. And with that in mind, I like to ensure that iCloud is working for me to keep my computer running with as little clutter as possible, as well as ensuring that everything is backed up in the cloud should I need it in the future. The way that you do that is you head into System Preferences, then choose Apple ID. Down here at the bottom of the menu, there is a checkbox called Optimise Mac Storage, and I always ensure that this is selected. Doing this will look to optimize the available storage on your Mac by allowing all of iCloud Drive to be stored locally on your machine, provided you have space, but then automatically making older files exist only in the cloud, therefore freeing up space on your machine. Then if you head into the Apple menu in the top left, then choose About This Mac, then Storage, and then Manage, you can see that you have a number of optimization options which you can configure. You can store files in iCloud, including photos, optimize storage for content you're watching on Apple TV, empty the bin automatically after a set period of time, and reduce clutter by sorting through files and deleting any especially large ones, which is definitely something worth doing from time to time. When you set your new Mac up, you're going to be prompted to set up a password for the computer itself, and you of course also have the password you'll have set up for your iCloud account, so a minimum of 2 passwords that you're going to need to remember, but then you've most likely got passwords stored in your iCloud keychain as well. So one of the first things you should absolutely be doing with your new Mac is enabling Touch ID, assuming that you've got a Mac that's got access to it. If you're on an M1 Mac, you've most likely got access to Touch ID. It's either going to be built into the laptop keyboard up here in the upper right, or it's going to be built into the separate keyboard like this one here. You might have set Touch ID up when you configured your Mac, but even so, I'd recommend setting up some additional fingers or thumbs for it. I believe you can have up to 3 in total on a Mac. Go to System Preferences, then Touch ID, and follow the steps to add other fingerprints in as needed. Also, if you've got an Apple Watch, you can enable the watch to unlock your Mac. Head to System Preferences, then Security and Privacy, and ensure that this option, Use your Apple Watch to unlock apps and your Mac, is enabled. Then, so long as you're wearing your unlocked Apple Watch whilst using your Mac, it will use the proximity of it to allow your Mac to be securely unlocked. New Macs, especially those with Apple Silicon, are lightning quick when it comes to getting powered up, but even then it makes sense to take some control over what apps are allowed to automatically fire themselves up when you switch your Mac on. There's a section of your Mac where you can choose this for yourself. Head to System Preferences, then Users and Groups, and then choose Login Items. Essentially, if an item is in here without a tick, it means that the software is going to open automatically as a full app each time you power up your computer. So Moom, for example, which is an excellent Windows manager, will open up automatically to its main menu screen. If I tick this hide box here, Moom will still open, but it will do so discreetly, running in the background instead, which is actually how I'd want this to open. If I want to stop an app like Moom from automatically opening each time I power on my Mac, I would highlight it and use the minus button down here to remove it. Likewise, if I want to add an app in, I can press the plus button and then choose that app from the Applications menu, and that app will open automatically each time I power on my Mac. Safari is a phenomenal browser, especially on Mac, but it's a bit overcautious about things by default. For example, when you go to download something on a brand new Mac, don't be surprised if you get a message asking if you want to allow downloads from that particular website, and then having to do this for each and every website that you visit from that point on. You can, however, override this. In Safari, go to Preferences, then choose Websites, and down here at the bottom, where you have the When Visiting Other Websites option, choose Allow. Now, any legitimate websites that you visit should only download items to your computer when you manually choose to download something, so you should be perfectly safe doing this. But if you prefer to keep the manual control, you could of course leave this as Ask instead and manually build up a collection of approved sites in this window here. The final tip I like to incorporate is configuring Finder to work the way that I like it to, and there's a few things I like to change in here. The first is that any important folders, like the folder where I keep all of my paperwork and scripts, for example, I like to have that included in the favorites bar on the left-hand side so that I can access it quickly whenever I need to. If you want to add a folder to your favorites, simply click and hold to select it and drag it over to the favorites section of the sidebar on the left, positioning it wherever you'd like it. If you right-click on a folder that's already in here, you can choose Remove from Sidebar if you need to remove it at a later date. I also like to add a couple of options in at the bottom of the Finder windows to help with navigating around my Mac. With a Finder window open, if you go to View up here at the top and ensure that both Show Path Bar and Show Status Bar are toggled on, you'll see these two bars at the bottom of every Finder window. One shows you the path used to get to the current window, which is helpful if you need to navigate your way back from a particular folder, while the other shows you a count of items in the current folder and the space you have left on the current drive. Finally, I like to use List View, but I want each Finder window to automatically default to List View when I open a new window and not to revert to icons. So what I can do is right-click anywhere in the Finder window and choose Show View Options. I'll ensure that Open in List View is toggled on, and down here at the bottom I'll press the Use as Defaults button to ensure that this is how folders open up from now on. If you prefer icons, follow the same steps, but ensure that you're looking at a folder with icons before following these steps. So there you go, 10 configurations that I always ensure I look at each time I'm setting up a new Mac. Remember, this could be for a new Mac or even a Mac that you've had to wipe and reformat. What about you? Any Mac configurations that you always use when setting up a brand new Mac? Drop me a comment and let's talk about it. And as ever, if you found this video useful, do please consider leaving me a like and subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. See you on the next video.